Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakahakwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. Shabbat Shalom. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'm going to start it off in Romans chapter 8, verse 16. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. This is speaking to the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And then you also have the Israelite foreigners who, through the scattering and the generations of living, amongst these different heathens and intermingling with them, have come to look like those heathen nations. But regardless, the Spirit still bears witness that we are the children of Israel, because when we go into these prophecies and into the scriptures, everything lines up with us. What our people would be going through, the Great Awakening, the prophets, and of course the curses of Deuteronomy 28. But hey, the Spirit also beareth witness of who these other nations are, especially the wicked, Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. Because when you look at these so-called white people, everything in regards to end times prophecies, the wicked and the Edomites fits them like a glove. And I opened up the video with this verse to preface this article from Mediate.com titled, Stephen Miller Laces into Our Enemies at CK Memorial Service. You are envy, you are hatred, you are nothing. And I'm going to play a little bit of his speech. And some of the things he says in this speech bears witness to his spirit that not only is he an Edomite, but his people are Edomites as well. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily, and it is simply for educational purposes.
Hello, patriots. Hello to our fearless president, Donald J. Trump. And hello to millions of Americans all across this land who are gathered in sadness and sorrow to mourn Charlie Kirk, but also to dedicate ourselves to finishing his mission and achieving victory in his name. The day that Charlie died, the angels wept, but those tears have been turned into fire in our hearts. And that fire burns with a righteous fury that our enemies cannot comprehend or understand. When I see Erica and her strength and her courage, I'm reminded of a famous expression. The storm whispers to the warrior that you cannot withstand my strength. And the warrior whispers back, I am the storm. Erica is the storm. We are the storm. And our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the city.
And we're going to stop right there. And, they took a part of that speech out and transcribed it right here. Our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion, our lineage, and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello, Miller said. Our ancestors built the cities, They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. And again, the Spirit beareth witness with our spirit. The Spirit beareth witness with their spirit that they are the biblical Edomites who ruled, those Grecian kingdoms, as well as the ancient pagan Roman Empire. What is it usually referred to? The Greco-Roman Empire, which when we go into the scriptures, we can see that the Greeks and the Romans, though originally, those people were Japhites, the ones in history, so-called Western civilization, are Edomites, who just like America came into those lands, took them over, pushed the original inhabitants out, and stole their identities. So let's go to the first book of Maccabees, chapter 1. I'm going to start at verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, speaking of what? Alexander, as he's known as today, Alexander the Great, which here it says he was a Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, in his lineage, the first over Greece, when the Edomites started taking over those Japhetic Greek lands and then started calling themselves the Greeks. Now, remember it says that he was a Macedonian. Let's go to the additions to Esther, also in the Apocrypha, chapter 16, verse 10. For Ammon, speaking of Haman, a Macedonian, the son of Amadatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received of us. So Ammon or Haman, who was second to King Ahasuerus, when you read in the book of Esther, it says right here, he was a Macedonian. Now let's go to Esther in the Bible, and you see the header reads, Haman's plot against the Jews. Esther 3 verse 1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Now when we go to the Strongs for the word Agagite, it's, H91, Agagi, which in the outline of biblical usage says, Agagite, I will overtop, said of Haman, Haman the Agagite. Now let's go to the root word of Agagite, which is H90, Agag. In the outline of biblical usage, Agag, I will overtop, king of Amalek, spared by Saul, but slain by Samuel. So while Alexander was referred to as a Macedonian, and in the addition to Esther, Haman was referred to as a Macedonian, in Esther, it's telling you what his real origins were, Agagite, which the Agagites go back to the Amalekites. And let's see who Amalek was. Genesis 36 and 12. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare to Eliphaz Amalek. These were the son of Adah, Esau's wife. So the Amalekites are Edomites. And when you go to the book of Numbers, it says that Amalek would be the first of the nations. And the Amalekites are the top tribe of the Edomites, and they would be known as your 1948ers today, which when you look at the head of everything in society, from, Hollywood to banking to politics, et cetera, who's at the top of the list? Those 1948ers, which when you go into the history of Stephen Miller, his people are Amalekites that came from Eastern Europe. So, hey, he was right in saying what? Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, Greece, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. The Spirit beareth with their spirit that they are the Edomites, the wicked, the Greeks, and the Romans. The Edomites would be ruling in the last days. So again, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, the Agagite, the Amalekite, the Edomite, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, his lineage, the first over Greece. The Edomites taking over those lands and, expropriating those identities. Verse 2, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. Alexander parting his kingdom amongst his generals, the four main ones that got the bulk of it being Ptolemy, which led to Ptolemy Egypt, Seleucus, the Seleucid Empire. Then you had Lysimachus and Cassander. What's the Seleucid Empire that was over in Western Asia, what would be known as the Middle East today, which included the land of Israel. And when you go into the history of the Maccabees, down the line, who did you have? Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, who made war against our people, which led to the Maccabean revolt. And what was he all about? Hellenization, pushing the ways of the Greeks, the Edomites, onto the nations, just as these Edomites do today with what? Westernization, Europeanization, and especially Americanization. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule, everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth, because the Edomites are the wicked. And again, look at the evils that Antiochus did to our people. When you look into the history of Rome, a lot of the same practices pushed in the West today they did, which led to what? The collapse of Rome, just as it's leading to the collapse of the West today. But let's go a little further. This is Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 39. And this is going into the statue of a man made of different metals that King Nebuchadnezzar of the ancient Neo-Babylonian Empire saw in his dream, and that the prophet Daniel interpreted for him. And these represented the heathen kingdoms that would be ruling before the kingdom of heaven. Verse 39, and after these shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And that brass is going into what? The belly and the thighs of brass, the Grecian kingdoms, which began with what? Alexander of Macedonia, reigning first in his stead over Greece. And now we're going into that fourth, kingdom, that fourth beast, the legs of iron. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And since the prophets came onto the scenes, these Christians finally learned the true breakdowns of the scriptures. So I remember when Blue Letter didn't have these little headers above, particular verses, but now they do. So what does it say above verse 39? Medo-Persia and Greece, that third kingdom of brass, and now that fourth kingdom, those legs of iron, the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. And then when you go down, You go into the last leg of that fourth beast, those iron toes mixed with miry clay, the reincarnated Roman Empire, the NATO EU system that the US is a part of. And this began, this is the final, form of it. But its origins began with what? The Renaissance in the late 1300s, the Renaissance or the rebirth of that Roman way back into the world when Esau started coming back into power. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 7. We're going to read verses 6 to 7, which goes a little more in depth into the characteristics of these beasts. Verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. This is going into the belly and thighs of brass, the Edomite Greeks, and it gives you a context clue, because it says the beast was like a leopard. And when you look up images of Alexander the Great, he had a leopard's pelt upon his horse, and his helmet was the face of a leopard, and that symbolized the speed, the swiftness in which he took down the Medo-Persians, those Japhetic Greeks, and expanded his empire in a short amount of time. And the wings that were upon its back is going into his 4 generals, which I just said were Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Verse 7, going into that 4th beast. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns, going into the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. So again, our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion, our lineage, our stead, and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello, Miller, the Amalekite said. So let's go back to the speech.
They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. Erica stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of warriors, of women who raised up families, raised up city, raised up industry.
That's another, context clue to who these Edomites are. America, or Babylon the Great in the scriptures, is referred to as what? The mother of harlots, as a woman, a queendom, because with Western civilization, what do they heavily push? Woman worship, putting the woman over the man. And what do they call their great cities? Metropolises, mother cities.
Raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light.
Ooh, what did he just say? Who pulled us out of the caves and out of the darkness into light. That's another characteristic of these Edomites, because, they were the cavemen, which wasn't, millions or hundreds of thousands of years ago with, Neanderthals or the Flintstones or anything like that. There's only a couple of thousand years ago, because when those Edomites were cast out of power of Rome, they fulfilled, that prophecy of them in Genesis chapter 3, where the serpent was told for deceiving Eve that what? He would go upon his belly and eat up dust, the rest of his life. And we know snakes don't eat dust. It was all parabolic. That serpent in the garden was a nation of people going back, they were the wicked back then. Then through the reincarnation, they became the seed of Cain. Then through the reincarnation, they became the seed of Esau. Just as from Adam, you had the sons of God going down to Abel, who was slain by Cain. Then you had Seth going to Noah, Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob all the way down to the 12 tribes. But let's rewind that real quick. What he
City
said.
raised up industry, raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light.
Their spirit beareth witness with them that they are the wicked, the Edomites. Now let's go to the book of Job, chapter 30. I'm going to start at verse 1. Job's present state is humiliating, and Job, who was a son of God, he's prophesying of these Edomites and how, they would have, his people as the Israelites in derision in the future. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision. Younger being, foolish, stupid, ignorant, which, is exactly what these Edomites are. Just look at how they run society. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. These people were so vile, Job wouldn't even put them by his dogs, which, who's known for bestiality out here and really loving those dogs in a intimate way? These Edomites. Over in Europe a couple of years ago, they were talking about, passing laws to legalize bestiality. Verse 2, yeah, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perished? For want and famine they were solitary, fleeing into the wilderness in former time, desolate and waste, who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. And when you think of mallows, think of marshmallows. And who loves marshmallows? Even though a lot of them aren't actually made by mallow root anymore. These Edomites. Think about cooking marshmallows by the fire, or those s'mores. Verse 5, they were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief. When Esau was taken out of power, from Rome, and, the Israelites took over, the Eastern European, not Eastern, or Eastern Roman Empire, then what? Going down to the Byzantine Empire, our ancestors, you had these other nations too, chase them into the mountains, into the Caucasus Mountains, which, what do these Edomites like to call themselves? Caucasians. They were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief, to dwell in the clefts of the valleys, in the caves of the earth, and in the rocks. And what did Stephen Miller just say? They brought us out of the caves into the light. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. And when those Edomites went up into those mountains, they became, like those cavemen. Again, that serpent eating up dust, which dust represents confusion. The Lord put them into that animalistic state to where, they were grunting, walking around on all fours. What you think about when you think of a caveman, just a beast. Look up that movie, The Quest for Fire, which is a perfect visualization of how these Edomites were getting down. And what's even, more enlightening is when we go to this Wikipedia article titled Wild Man. The wild man of the woods, the woodwose or the wodwose, is a mythical figure and motif that appears in the art and literature of medieval Europe, the Dark Ages. And that's when our people, specifically the Southern Kingdom, the so-called Negroes, were ruling in Europe with the kings and the queens and the knights. You had the Moors, all that. Comparable to the satyr or faun type in classical mythology until Sylvanus, the Roman god of the woodlands. The defining characteristic of the figure is its wildness. From the 12th century, it was consistently depicted as being covered with hair. And hey, who does the woodwose or the wild man look like? A Edomite, because this wasn't a mythical figure. This was actually a historical figure. These Edomites, when they were chased into the mountains and when they were among the bushes and the nettles where they brayed. Again, what did Stephen Miller say? And out of the caves, we came into the light. Speeding up to the 1300s where they started coming out of those mountains. And, our ancestors tried to civilize them. And they repaid them in kind by taking them over. The Renaissance or the rebirth, that Roman way back into the earth. This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, which is only one chapter. I'm going to start at verse 1. Edom will be humbled. And this whole book is dedicated to the judgment and the downfall of you Edomites. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. And what do you see now? These nations rising up against these Edomites, especially in the west. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. Going back to that Job 30. To dwell in the cliffs of the valley, in caves of the earth, and in the rocks. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rocks, whose habitation is high. And when you think about mountain climbing, who comes to mind? These Edomites. So they were dwelling in the caves. And fast forward to today, what do you have? These skyscrapers, which are literally, artificial mountains. These Edomites, again, their spirit bearing witness with themselves that what? They like to live at those high elevations. And, also, as it says, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? A mountain is a high place. So what? Their pride is high. They think that they're never going to go down, which is pretty much what Stephen Miller is going into with that speech. We built these great civilizations, and with the death of CK, you've set a fire that won't be put out. Verse 4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle. And when you look at the history of these different Edomite, powers, what was one of the main symbols they always use? Rome had the eagle. Nazi Germany had the eagle. Various European powers had the eagle. And lest we forget, the United States of America with that bald eagle. And though thou set thy nest among the stars, hey, Houston, we have landed, which there's controversy with that. These Edomites have these satellites and space stations in low orbit space. Thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahweh. So, hey, you Edomites are going down, and we can clearly see that we're living in the last seconds of your rulership.
The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot.
The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, that thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock.
Conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us. Because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred. You are nothing.
Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Everything he's describing his enemies to be is exactly the characteristics of you Edomites. Just look at your history and your track record of what you've done to the earth and to these different nations, especially the children of Israel, which all this vitriol is ultimately aimed at. Because, with CK's, deletion, a week or so ago, what happened immediately afterwards? You had those HBCUs, those historic black, college universities getting threatened. And, you had those Edomite men chanting, fight back, white man. Fighting back against what? They really wanted to pin that on, you so-called Negroes of the Southern Kingdom, especially when, with the story that's been presented, it was an Edomite. But we know who the ultimate target is, the men of the Lord. Because what? The prophets prophesying this word is bringing about the end of your rulership. Hence why now you've got TikTok using, I believe it's Oracle now, which is a, Israeli backed, program. I don't know if it's, no, it might be Gideon. I think it's Gideon. Yeah, Gideon. But, recently the U.S. and Israel are using that program. I believe it's Gideon. You can correct me if I'm wrong, to search through TikTok. And really, Gideon's going to be used to search through all the social media to what? Send that information to the authorities so that they can prevent situations like what happened with CK, from happening. And then, to find anti-Semitism, anything that can be deemed as so-called hate speech, really hate speech or just truth being revealed by these Edomites, so that what? They can cut that information off and come against the perpetrators of it, which again, the chief target is going to be the men of the Lord, because as it says in Matthew 24, verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. These words, chiefly of the men of GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers coming in the spirit of GMS, is taking down Esau's rulership. So now they're scrambling to do whatever they can to avert prophecy from coming to its fulfillment.
You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk?
We're the ones who lift up humanity. But remember what it said back in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 9. And when Alexander's generals put crowns upon their heads, evils were multiplied in the earth.
You have made him immortal. You have immortalized Charlie Kirk. And now millions will carry on his legacy. And we will devote the rest of our lives to finishing the causes for which Charlie gave his last measure of devotion. You cannot defeat us. You cannot slow us. You cannot stop us. You cannot deter us. We will carry Charlie and Erica in our heart every single day and fight that much harder because of what you did to us. You have no idea the dragon you have awakened. You have no idea how determined.
Let's rewind that.
Because of what you did to us. You have no idea the dragon you have awakened. You have no idea how determined we will be to save this civilization, to save the West, to save this republic. Because our children...
Or do they like to say civilization began with the West or the Greeks? But remember what he said. You have no idea the dragon that you have awakened, which I believe it's transcribed in here as well. We will carry Charlie and Erica in our heart every single day and fight that much harder because of what you did to us. You have no idea the dragon you have awakened. You have no idea how determined we will be to save this civilization, to save the West, to save this republic. And hey, the dragon is spoken of in the scriptures as well. Let's go to Revelation chapter 12. I'm going to start at verse 3. And again, hey, thanks Blue Letter for letting us know what these things are speaking about, since, you figured it out. But this is Revelation 12, verse 3. And the header reads, the red dragon, Satan, And you do have the spiritual demon Satan, who is the top left-handed angel of the Most High, but you also have his physical counterpart on the earth, Esau, Edom, just as the children of Israel are the physical counterpart on the right hand of the Most High and Yahushai on the earth. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon, that red dragon, stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was to be born. And that red dragon is speaking of the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. And where it said its tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, that's talking about the southern kingdom, which was under the rulership of the Roman Empire, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And then what did you have? 70 AD, where the Romans came in and destroyed and sacked Jerusalem. And as it says, and the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was to be born. Verse 5, the male child, Christ, or Hamashiach, and she brought forth a man child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto the Most High and to his throne. And this child is speaking of Yahushai, who, when he was born, who tried to put him to death? Herod the Great, which Herod was also an Edomite. When you go back to his lineage, his father was Antipater the Idumean, which Idumean is just the Greek way of saying Edom. And Herod was a client king of the Roman Empire, so an extension of the Roman Empire. So now we see this red dragon, who it is. Hey, you have awakened a dragon. And who was the main target of this dragon back then? The children of Israel. No different than today. I'm going to jump down to verse 12. Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil, that deceiver, Esau, Edom, specifically their elites, really pulling the strings behind the scenes. The Rothschilds, which when you go into what Rothschild means, it means red shield, that color red again. What did it say about Esau in Genesis 25 and 25? And the first came out red all over. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Again, you have awakened a dragon, and we're going to save, the West and our civilization. And like I was just saying, with the prophets preaching this word, it's bringing about Esau's rulership, hence why they're fast forwarding, everything. And we can especially see that under Donald Trump, heavily pushing for those cryptocurrencies and, this digital infrastructure. They erected that statue of him holding a Bitcoin. He was over in the UK meeting with the king over the digital infrastructure between the US and Britain. And what this whole situation with CK, now they're pushing for censorship of hate speech and wanting to get the Department of Justice to go against those who preach so-called hate speech. Donald Trump's taken away all these government benefits from the people. These tariffs are raising the cost of living for people. Hey, they're moving quickly to collapse this system so that they can bring about what? That NWO, that fourth industrial revolution, that great RESET. And the main target is going to be you Israelites. Let's jump down to verse 17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, Israel, which, when you go back up, the first 2 verses, speaking of the nation of Israel, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. When you go to Jeremiah 6 and 2, it says that the Lord likens Israel unto a woman. and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of the Most High and have the testimony of Yahushua Hamashiach. And that remnant is speaking of the elect, who they want to come after, because, the elect is who's going to be saved, and the elect, are keeping the commandments of the Most High and have the testimony of Yahushua Hamashiach. They have the Old Testament and the New Testament together with them. But now I'm going to close it out in Revelation chapter 13. I'm going to read verses 1 to 3. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his 10 horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. Going back to that red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. Verse 2 is giving you an overview of all of Esau's rulerships. It said it was like unto a leopard. And remember, Alexander the Macedonian, the first in his stead to reign over Greece, when Esau came into his first major rulership with the Greeks, then went into the Romans, the Greco-Roman Empire, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and the feet are the bottom of something, which, that's speaking of the Russian Edomites, who aren't a part of the iron toes mixed with miry clay, but what? These Romans are going to be these Russian Edomites are going to be the ones that are going to lead these nations to shoot nuclear missiles onto the United States of America and the land of Israel. Even America's European allies are going to turn against her to ally themselves with those Russians. So if you lose your stability with your feet, you go down. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion, going into the British, which just as the Russians are known for, having a bear as their icon, the British were known for having a lion as their icon. And who came out of the British? The 8th that is of the 7, the Americans. And his mouth is the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. That Roman way being followed by these different Edomite, rulerships. Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, the ancient pagan Roman Empire, and his deadly wound was healed, the Renaissance, when these Edomites came back into power and rebirthed that Roman way into the world. And all the world wondered after the beast. And when you've looked at the history of Western civilization up until recently, all these nations wanted to westernize themselves. Hence why they wanted to speak, English and these other European languages. They wear a business suit and a tie. They shave their faces. They use the US dollar. They use the technology and the medical practices of the West, etc., etc. But that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time.